Good evening and welcome. Glad to see you all tonight. I'm going to begin by acknowledging the lands upon which we are gathered, lands upon which I live and work at this university. The traditional and ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kaikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tawasin peoples. Relationship and connection, even when we are unaware of the full extent of our relatedness, our relations, and our connectedness and our connections, is crucial to how we might now dwell on this earth. I'm Stephen Collis. I'm a professor at the university, chair of the English department. I'm president of something called the Poetry in Canada Society I'll say something about momentarily, and I'm Phyllis Webb's literary executor, so I'll say a few things about Phyllis Webb as well as what's going to go on tonight. Well, I'll start with the Poetry in Canada Society. We are an independent organization attempting to found a poetry library here in Vancouver. Many countries have libraries dedicated to poetry. I've visited ones in Scotland and England, several in the US I've visited before. I know there's a nice one in Ireland, although I've not been there. But there's no poetry-only library in Canada. And we would love to found this. There are several board members in the room here. We've got James and Teresa and Annie are all here on our board tonight. We're doing a few things. We put this annual event on. We run a reading series also here at Harbour Centre in the library called Off the Shelf. That we have 3 readings in the fall, 3 readings in the new year every year. And we've got a website with profiles of poets that needs a lot of work. We'll get back to working on that soon, I'm sure. But we're doing what we can so far, and we just need to find that person with way too much money who thinks poetry. I could give you guys millions of dollars. You know, it's Vancouver. Maybe we need billions now to like have a building, or just But we'll take millions and just have part of the inside of a building somewhere. One thing we're doing to celebrate this event tonight is we're publishing a chapbook of new work by the poet who's being honored. They are here now, and I'm going to say this so I don't forget that before you leave tonight, you should get your copy, a free chapbook of new work by Wayde Compton. So we'll get those out at the end and put them at the back. If there's room for food, we're all somewhere else, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Okay, so I want to thank the Poetry in Canada Society. A lot of work goes into putting this on tonight. I want to thank the Fraser University English department, which also helps support this event. And especially want to call out Rebecca Salustris, our communications coordinator in English at SFU, who's behind the camera here, who does a lot of work to help to pull this off as well. And to James Gifford, our board member, who makes the chapbooks. And that's a shorthand for saying there's some beautiful and loving design work goes into producing these. I hope you enjoy the book when you pick it up. James is doing this every year for us, and it's an incredible gift to have that. I go to James's place and we sit around the kitchen table and fold and cut and staple and sew chapbooks together. This year's Phyllis Webb Memorial Reading recognizes West Coast poet and author Wayde Compton. I'm going to clap for that. Wayde will be joined here on stage tonight. That's stage. By Cecily, Nicholson, and Courtenay Chan. I'll say more about everybody in due course. Wayde will read, and after Wayde reads, Courtenay and Cecily will say a few words in response to Wayde's work, and we'll have a very brief discussion, but there will be time at the end, and I'll make sure we don't go on too long, because there'll be, the bar will be open, and there'll be more food coming too, so hang out towards the end and have a snack and have a drink and have a conversation. Okay, just want to say a few things about Phyllis Webb. And for anyone who doesn't know, Phyllis Webb was a West Coast, Salt Spring Island-based poet, CBC radio broadcaster, CBC television. In 1967, I think, there was actually a 13-episode CBC TV show in which Phyllis interviewed avant-garde poets and philosophers and different public figures with an incredible beehive hairdo and like a cigarette on a long stem thing. You could barely see the people on TV because of all the smoke in the room at the studio at CBC. She was a major Canadian cultural figure, but she was also someone, well, I'll say more about that in a minute, someone who needed to escape Canada and things about Canada. And that's how she wound up coming onto the West Coast and essentially hiding out in Salt Spring Island for more than 50 years. Okay. Phyllis would have turned 99 this week. And next year, we'll be looking for ways to celebrate her centenary. There's a few things planned already. Webb's work has always seemed singular to me, paradoxically singular in its multiplicity, its curiosity and permeability, and in its quality it's this quality amongst many other things that we hope to keep alive and honor with the annual Phyllis Webb Memorial Reading. Webb strikes me as a crucial example of how to dwell as an unsettled settler on these unceded lands, hiding in plain sight, suspicious of the nation and other forms of colonial identification and belonging, never more Canadian than in her wariness of her Canadianness, curious about others, other traditions, and the Indigenous presence that preceded her family's arrival on this coast and persists long after. These all seem good things to keep in mind, and I think they are qualities well embodied in this year's honoree. So every year I read one very short poem from Phyllis, which I will do now. Yoko Ono was seen in the Empress Hotel today. She can never be seen for herself alone again. Shots ring out in Iran, Afghanistan, El Salvador. At night here, pit lampers kill deer. Everywhere the killings go on. In my own hand, a flea died only yesterday. I sit in my quilted jacket, calling the birds, whose warning cries strike just beyond the window. It's my beautifully beat up and duct taped peacock blue, the collected poems of Phyllis Webb. It's seen many classrooms and a few rainstorms with Fred Waugh and I. Fred just walked in reading in the rain on Salt Spring Island once. Wayde Compton is the author of 6 books and the editor of 2 literary anthologies. His collection of short stories, The Outer Harbour, won the City of Vancouver Book Award in 2015, and his work has been a finalist for 3 other City of Vancouver Book Awards. That's gotta be a record. Wow. He won a National Magazine Award for Fiction in 2011 and was nominated for the Dorothy Livesey Poetry Prize in 2000. In 2002, Compton co-founded the Hogan's Alley Memorial Project, an organization devoted to researching and promoting Vancouver's historical Black community, and later helped establish the Hogan's Alley Working Group and the Hogan's Alley Society, its successor organizations. He's been a writer-in-residence here at SFU, Green College at the University of British Columbia, and the Vancouver Public Library. Compton currently teaches in the Department of Writing at the University of Victoria, and his latest book is Toward an Anti-Racist Poetics. Maybe it's not your latest book anymore, now that we've chatted with you tonight. When Wayde's first book, 49th Parallel Psalm, was published in 1999, it took the lid off our heads. A lot of us, Wayde's peers and Wayde, were still in school. But here was a poet truly too cool for school. What we found in Psalm was hip-hop influenced poetry, stories, visual poems, histories of migration, and struggles for voice and recognition. The book was music, and it was an education. And of course, Wayde has gone on to be one of our premier poet historians, an activist and a specialist of all the genres you want to imagine, often mixed together in the same propulsive book. He even invented an island so folks could reveal themselves, fighting over it. Please welcome Wayde Compton.
Thanks for coming. I just want to thank Stephen and also James for making the chapbook, for Cecily, for Courtenay for being here, and all of you for And it's a great honor to be here and be associated with Phyllis Webb, somebody whose poetry I've read for a long time and really appreciated. And I was going to say, Phyllis Webb, shout out to a queen, and then thought, well, she's an anarchist though, so that doesn't really work. So shout out to an anti-monarchist. What I'm going to read is a poem that I've been working on for a really long time. I was trying to think before today when I started this, and I don't remember exactly. I'm not great at remembering things like that. But I know I brought an early draft to Cecily when you were the writer-in-residence here. Is that correct? And when was that?
2017.
2017. So at least 10 years, which is very strange. But I mean, I published a couple of the books in the meantime, so it's just one of those projects that is taking its time to be born. But I'm going to read the first two parts of it. So it's based on the Argonautica by Apollonius of Rhodes, so the ancient Greek epic, which is one of the earlier epics. So it's the Jason and the Argonauts epic, Voyage of the Argo. Like that book, it's also in 4 parts, so these will be the first 2 parts. It's loosely based on it in this way. So in that original epic, so in the story of Jason and the Argonauts, it begins with the king, who's a usurper, whose seer tells him that your reign is going to end and your life is going to end by the next person you see wearing only one shoe. And so that coincides with Jason coming home from war. He's a war hero. On the way home, he stops to help an old woman cross the stream. In doing so, he loses one of his sandals. Later, we find out that is actually the goddess Hera in disguise, who, because he's done this compassionate thing for her, ends up favoring her on her journey. But when he gets there, the king sees him and realizes this is who will be the death of me, and so he wants to execute him. He can't do that because Jason's a popular war hero and people won't stand for it. So instead, he sends him off on this mission to get the golden fleece, which is guarded by this dragon, and is essentially a suicide mission, hoping he'll die. The hitch is that people recognize this is unjust, and so the Argonauts come forward, the local heroes, and say, we'll help him, so we'll go along on this journey. And so it goes off on the epic. Maybe this will come out in the discussion about how I got here, but my version of it is a kind of a mashup of that and a slave narrative. So this is kind of using the bones of that story, but it's set on the Pacific coast of North America at the end of the 18th century. And as you'll see, the focus is on the sort of on the sandal rather than the hero. It's epistles to Oya. Oya is the Yoruba goddess of storms. Oya helped me tell of a star bastion, an enslaved woman, and 3 metonyms torn from the reference, who sailed the Covery in search of gold, heaven, and home. Part 1, the fort. I took myself far off from my own presence, far indeed, and made myself an object. Franz Fanon, Black Skin, White Masks. Shaped like a star on the coast of Guerrero, New Spain, made of stone, stacked by brown hands, Mexican granite, volcanic ash, mortar, a fort. Inside, the constellation of a woman enslaved, surviving 3 commanders to, with her star-shaped hands, lubricate the trade between this bastion and another across the tomb of blue and green. One world of white caps away in a yet newer Spain, in Manila, Galangal getting silver, pepper, cinnamon, and camphor, smithing muskets and the cannon. Imagine this desecration, this inverted alchemy, this continent across her shoulders, this hemisphere holding her, a part, a figure, an externality dispersed on the ledger of waves, harbors, ports, and fields. They had overlanded her,
a saturation of marching to the edge of an ocean mockingly larger than the last, to a fort shaped hopelessly like summation. The worth of her walking on flagstones, laundering, washing, up and down the stone steps, ashore, each step a blow, each freshly foisted littoral hiss, always there, just one leap past a rampart over which one could sail and spray forever, this every day or any other. But on one febrile evening, one sight punctured her midst across the yard. In the eye of her work, a pyramid of trash near their quarters, its capstone of memory, a form, a vessel, of a limb, an illusion in the refuse. Halfway back, she stopped and regarded a soldier's boot, worn through, leather undone from walking in the cadence of the racking sun, a husk of power, a boot that a man, a boy, infanteria, a Spaniard, a Mexican, wore and discarded, returned. This thing she saw, its size so shockingly small, pried as it was from sal de mi camino, and parted from the stance of its paired self, a lone thing, a single lost boot on the off-castings of the unbroken garrison on this coast of Guerrero. She rescued the boot, its smallness. It went under her cot, where she kept it. Its suggestion of a boy's foot, a boot emptied of soldiering, only a boy, her lost one, along the way in this cataclysm of coasts. In the words she whispered to it, she found him. In the commander's quarters, gathering washing, she stopped, and her shape formed in the ornate lead frame looking glass above the mantel. Herself a stutter, a ripple in the fox silver, a flash of seeing, and in her cradling arms swaddled warm, the worn cherub at her hip as she worked, the two oblong in the moment, together just ahead of missing, of breaking. And above his bed a painting, a flattery of himself, this commander, his eyes shadows, his face a simmer, a smear of power, at his neck a locket on a chain, a spiral image of a ram's horn etched there in gold, and circling back upon itself, hung in this paint as in life over his heart. Imagine her being brought before the commander through a sun shower of bruja, spat past the heat-cracked lips of the men. Imagine the two of them, her, this discarded boot, sent up an earthquake of steps to the boss and the priest on the overlook, cloaked in a hectoring breeze. They talked, but not to her, about her, before her, at her, asked questions of her without waiting for answers. She haltingly understood, the boot cradled in the crook of her dignity. The priest, she gathered, had had a revelatory dream. Some virgin in an azure voice had told him this curt prophecy. The commander will die by the next to arrive at the fort wearing just one shoe. This is what was said to the priest in his mind by the mother of their God as he slept in this gyre of fears. And she knew, seeing the commander weakly wave the thought off, that he nonetheless believed it. And so the boot, a boy, shoe enough, sun, a pox, her shivering conception was under a kind of warning. The two men conferred, she burned, they argued, she held tight, they differed then converged. A mirage, they agreed, could not be killed, though it could kill. If this slave, witch-like, had breathed a spell into semblance, the conjuration was ghostly. Destroying the boot would merely free it to float unseen. But the sea, they agreed, could cage life or death more finally than any fire. This curse, this mark, they were sure, would cling to the boot wherever it went. Their sentence was to set it adrift, to banish it to the contractions of the Pacific. They took him from her arms, a sad boot, and the echo, the tide, scuttled her. She fell, but they stood her up, and in time all knew she would work again. When her fever broke, she would return to her descending senses. A sloop, an algebra of planks, battle-broken, one in piracy, beside a dock that juts out past the foreshore into the bruise of evening. On its deck, a genesis that is the boot awaits a reading of exile in the morning, an asterisk of soldiers before the gangplank, guarding, at the priest's insistence, its stepless pall. The men-at-arms huddle against this farcical watch, drink through the hoax of it, coconut brandy wetting their scoffing as the moon blanches the ocean. The oldest says that the arrested boot, like any other so condemned, should be shown a final mercy. A last night with a woman for the celibacy of drifting. He sends the youngest quick to the bastion, laughing, to fetch an apron. The younger returns, balls it, throws. It unfurls like a slow slap landing on the deck. They toast the joke of this day. Both are so summoned, hemorrhages of human motivation, animations, a boot, an apron. At a pause, the middleman produces a rattle from his pocket, a gourd he took from one of the shackled, a lacquered bulb full of clicking shards of memory, clinking fragments of shell, a trophy worth more now to him in the form of this drunken prank they are making, a plank in the shelter of slurring. He offers it, all sincerity, a right maker to pronounce their boot and apron honest, a priest, as he ordains the rattle, to marry the two. More laughter, and over goes the rattle, clattering against the wood of the ex-English exiling sloop. But that crash cracks the spell. Their watch sours, goes solemn. The wind whips up. The trio stills, a step too far, something in the shaking. They try to be jovial, and bicker in whispers. The wind is a sudden hatchet off the water. They bleed heat and watch to the east uneasily, till the morning star climbs over the stones of the fort and relieves them of what they have spoken of. Imagine a boot, an apron, a rattle in the jail of the forecastle at sunrise while a commander, a priest, and a pilot assemble to talk them into forgottenness from the dock. The obverse of prophecy. Just the pilot boards, and the men get ready to retire as the commander, catching a smirk on the lips of one man working, marks the wound this move has gouged out of their respect for him. To close, he decides to punctuate this ghost marooning with a laugh, and declaims before the crowd that the boot can return, but only when its hull is low with Juan de Fuca's storied northern goal. With that treasure only may the boot buy its way out of exile, says the commander, and the men laugh halfway, watching his commanding eyes carefully. To make it clear before the sloop is loosed, the commander repeats, "Bring me gold, boot, or never return. Bring me gold and I'll promote you, a corporal ghost. The pension of a life of new leather, laces, or land." A real joke then, so the men laugh. The lines are cast, they fall out. The commander and all go back to the business of continent making. Only the priest stays, lips pursed. He crosses himself. His loamy eyes on the pilot, his mind a Marian dream. The sky is lacerate. He stays on the dock till he sees for himself that the pilot has the sloop well into the drift. He stays through the pilot's solitary rowing back to the dock in the dinghy. He stays and watches the wind, whose wishing will or won't make the world over. And only when the distance shivers the line between sky and water does he leave. Oya, you, the inverse of mapping, nevertheless illustrate the wind of limblessness that can carry us home. Let us go. Theirs is an infectious language, clad in error. A hemophilic is a crown, an age is of sail, a fever is El Dorado. People with inclinations, childhoods, minds, eyes, aspirations, chattel. Even if it is through their gate of stains, giving way to their ununderstood world. Oya, weave us, weigh us, wave us through and through to you. Land like an eye shuddering, an ocean a sheet, a squall, trans-flat and drenched in direction. Four corners of nowhere making a compass of them. Under the bone-colored sun, a divination of three shimmering abjurations. Wind, wave, blazed white, gust of wake, pleated spray, breach to careen, reel to each scream of a swell. So storms a winnowing, lightning, a labyrinthine forking, prophetic and fulgent in its itinerant center. Defuca, Calafia, Guerrero, Cortez, Orion, Delil, Vespucci, Abu, Jehovah, Linnaeus, Aquinas, Menzcala, Liverpool, Merseyside, Zephyrus, and April. Thaddeus, Mary, Polaris, Panon, Carlos IV, George III, the Pacific Ocean, a rattle, the Covery, the nameless waves. No Trinity, neither return, nor prayer, ceremony, vision, ritual, steering. Just a wheel of fraying water, a running again, a renegade, its sole secret, a plate, a pole, a rope, a rod, it doesn't matter. Dismanufacture will horizon them all. But a sudden point where the brine splits, a rise, a ridge, a height, and sand, an ellipsis of a beach, a coming, a running, a ground. The wreck. The wind picks who stays planted. Shall ignite, dear current occupant. The hand doesn't always move the tool. A coin can conspire to fall through a grate. You curse a broken wheel, so a road can toss a traveler, and a clock can tell its days by counting our deaths. And the wreck of the Lemnos, butchered by the tide, slivered into time, emptied of itself and everything it held on its side, devoured by sun, salt, wind, sailing sideways into a snatched docking, gray sand like powder unlit, the rippling fabric of the surf takes apart the day that almost reaches it twice along the cusp of the shore. Crates littered like shards of crockery, cracked Lemnos lost, an ejecta of cargo paying out all over the mark, brave of the hazel water, the haunt of a lading's worth of dresses, tethered by the circling wind to the driftwood, dancing out above pools, tumbled, tidal. They are the stream, the unfolded, undelivered, to some unmade settlement, to clothe a colony. Those shapes of women in linen, of gusts, expectation, whirls across oceans, the strewn of the wreck of the Lemnos, a brigantine, a weather-warped shell of wood, of a settling plunder banked, freed by a reef of breaking, an unseeming keel in the subtext of the foreshore. These seething dresses have the beach. They flourish beside the broken planks, timber, litter, lines, bones. These garments would have them stay. The aperture in the hull is their mouth. The dawn light speaks hoarsely through it. The crates are not dice on the shore. See them as teeth. See the fabric as fluttering tongues, rhetorically plosive in the Californian vapor. Argument. A wreck is a palace of the broken. Crashing is release. The world is a robe turned inside out. And we will weave our way out of the fiber of mortal submersion where their story drowns. Tool escaping is a point in favor of people being finally undone. Silver and copper in spray versus sand on a slope of tidal relenting. Stay, stop, say the stream. But the boot lobbies for the north, for gold, for return to the fore. The terms, waves, water, the way it contracts against the platinum of the moon, the aurum of the sun. North in that notion, that current, toward his own mothered unsundering. The dresses, meant for a colony yet to come, hold court across the spit like gauze on a superating new world. Their presence a maneuver, a competing myth, an armor. A wreck is an exit, a new invocation, a blotting out of one story for something new and bluer. A society, a jetty, a crenellation, a space through which the strewn might flank their making and haunt their way out of the threadbare intentions of mortals. The strewn are no mermaids, no sirens. They are their own treasure, an objective tale telling itself through this water story where destroy as a word produces all the home they need. The rattle or burl of another grain envisions rather a third egg. A glass enjammed world, an after inanimation, a heaven of things, an Arcadia. The rattle believes, preaches, the part of a priest, its sermon, a dream, imagining a dream, an Elysium for their own final always. North is the route, not for lucre, but the clatterer, shells shifting incessantly inside, speaks his retort from the ornamental aura of his hard-varnished soul. But the apron perceives all the way to the end of this unfurling, a gust of exile, or the center of her own rancor, here among the stream, array against the sky, in the staking of their own sighting. The dye in the linen of her soul is sour, the wreck a walled city, the crafting knife of the wind carves, fraying will howl out a future under the towering clouds. The skull of the lemnos thinks them into a nation of shrouds, an atlas, an unstitching from the living. Out of a continental chest of drawers, a hope, a manifest of peton l'air, flag-like in the offshore wind, and sand freed by salt and sun respun. Imagine the apron here in the vivid hive of the wreck and its strewn society in the unmaking, under the mauve sky, clustered in the gesture of collection, flecks of freedom, their own doing, their own object existence and interception, a deciphering of subjection. They undulate, they flit from intention to aspiration, supine in the slant ascendancy. The apron says here is where the story becomes their object on this luminous sand. They can join the strewn and stand outside the rendering of destinies festering like hot fruit not theirs. Here is where an object future is, if, she says, they stay. Stop.
So one formality is that every year we present the Webb Award honoree with an original collage by Phyllis Webb. I inherited about 50 of these. So we got about 50 years of awards to hand out. So Wayde, you can be that.
Your work makes such a conscious effort to move away from traditional and static ideas of belonging. Instead, you offer a way of representing identity as an active, reciprocal, and nourishing practice. You've given us really powerful tools to think through these ideas. I'm thinking in particular your concept of phoneticizing, which names that specific friction of misidentified and the subsequent realities that the observed mixed person is forced to negotiate. You then pair this reality of being read with your theory of schizophonophilia, taking that love of the split sound and turning it into a creative response. You frame mixed identity as an active process of sampling, remixing the historical fragments available to us in a particular time and place. What interests me is in these frameworks and how they translate to your experimental poetics. In your recent book, Toward an Anti-Racist Poetics, you suggest that easy-to-read or conventional stories can actually reinforce habits of recognition and stereotype. You argue that experimental writing isn't just an aesthetic choice, but a tool for activism. This leads me to my question. Do you see experimental form as a deliberate way to protect the mixed subject? I'm thinking here more of an element of care taking place. By creating a narrative space that refuses to be easily read, are you carving out a safe space where multiracial identities can creatively exist for themselves without being immediately categorized by the reader? In other words, is it part of the goal to make the reader work harder so the subject can rest?
Hello everyone. Wayde, Courtenay, that's so smart. First of all, I want to thank Poetry in Canada Society for your hosting of this award and all the hard work that's going into your project. And then the invitation to speak. I am quite honored to be here and to have an opportunity to respond to the work and presence of Wayde Compton. This reading tonight, Wayde, not surprisingly, encapsulates the intelligence and intricacies and, I mean, also accessibility of your writing. There's something that we've come to expect and associate with you. Each turn in topic and genre through the years in your writing is something that we look forward to. There's really no project that you will advance that we're not going to be excited to engage with, because we know the work is going to resonate and it's going to be relevant. I impose a we here, and I don't mean it in an imperial sense. I mean, first of all, those of us gathered in this room this evening. I mean, look at us, right? We're a beautiful audience of community, of poets, of peers, students, admirers, strangers and close friends through the years. I could call out names and just say this is an esteemed bunch. And we are all here to celebrate you. This beautiful constellation. I say we also because I'm thinking of, I guess a network, maybe is I don't know if that's the right word, but who recognizes anyway a distinct and thriving culture and community of African descent, connecting through Black experience, Black aesthetics, research, and excellence in the Pacific North. And one that does not, as Courtney's comments have preceded, that does not preclude the mixedness and the complexity of what it means to be from more than one thing. Black community in the Pacific North, of course, we've been here a long while, actually. And part of the reason I have a depth of knowledge about that, particularly the literary and the oral and pioneer history of that, is because of Wayde Compton's work. I think of Bluesprint forever. I mean, honestly, such a grounding text, there's nothing like it. All of Wayde's projects, really, there's nothing like them. The resonance that they have is partly because they're rooted in hard work and in research and endurance. I mean, this place has been hard and continues to be hard for mixed and Black community. But Wayde's projects are also aloft, as you can hear tonight, in beauty and detail and the reverence of everything from the water to the ship to the narrative that's folding through, the depth of history, the geography. Like, we could go on what we just heard tonight. And there's something to that for me that's always in Wayde's work, is aloft in a kind of perseverance, a kind of futurity, and also actually a kind of wit, a dry one, if you know Wayde, I think. But it's always there. There's this kind of just sparkle, I think. And we know that Wayde Compton deserves a key to the city of fucking Vancouver, doesn't it? Yeah, you got I don't know what they would actually open, but if they do. Wayde is such an important part of this city. And Wayde's writing, however, comes up everywhere that I travel. There are professors who teach his work all over, readers who have been inspired, students who study, write, and research on your work with a laser focus. I've come across students in conferences like, do you know Wayde Compton? Just a small note, your book, Performance Bond, was one of just a couple of Canadian books that was present in a fairly substantial library, the Berkeley Miles House, where I lived last year in the Bay Area. And I was delighted to see it. The spine kind of popped out at me. I recognized it right away. And it struck me, again, just Wayde is known. And I felt the kind of pride about that. I felt proud about that. I mean, I don't know if proud is quite the right word, but I think maybe proud about being in proximity to this person. But it's not just what Wayde writes, like, as has been mentioned a little bit in Steve's opening, but Wayde's work is grounded in the social. It's grounded in community, in performance, and in pedagogy, in ways that have impacted the landscape of this city and this region and beyond. There is the integral leadership that Wayde has brought to SFU, to the Writers' Studio, to Douglas College, to the University of Victoria, and so on. There is the incredible legwork, incredible and lengthy legwork that has gone into the Hogan's Alley Society and the Hogan's Alley Memorial Project. That there exist buildings now and a continuing society and youth and elders connecting over this project is extraordinary. And I feel like Wayde is always like, I'm really not that involved anymore when you talk to him about it. You know, and meanwhile, he's there at some city urban planning consultation with breakout groups, 5 p.m. on a weeknight, still putting in the work. Wayde helps connect people even when he's not involved. When he's not free, he actively delegates. And I've been the beneficiary of that delegation on more than one occasion through the years. He is someone who has so much information to share, and there's a quality and a depth to that. And that capacity is the basis of network and of neighborhood and of community and of organizing, which on some level is to say, I'm sorry to report, Wayde, but you are always going to be entwined in the legacy and that legacy work, and joyfully, I hope. I just want to wind down with one more story, which is actually where Wayde started tonight. So Wayde was the Ellen and Warren Tallman SFU Writer in Residence in 2007, 2008. And I plucked up the courage. Probably a few people were like, you should go see Wayde, or Wayde was like, you should come, you know, like it took a while. But I sent my 10 pages of writing and I rolled up. And we talked about a bunch of things in that meeting, but there are 3 notes that really were so critical for me to hear, and they stay with me today. First of all, he drew my attention to the sonics and the cadence of my writing at the time. And he did that at the level of the line and the phenome and I guess the effervescence that was present in my work that I really wasn't aware of. But not only did he talk to me about it, but he pointed to the language on the page and explained to me how I was doing it, which I did not know. Keep in mind, I was not educated in poetry. He said, secondly, something pretty simple to me, like you're a writer. And I thought, I am a writer. Again, because I hadn't really come to realize that about myself. And finally, Wayde called attention to this collection of work, and he said, you know, you've got some materials here, you should really write a book. And I left that conversation thinking, I should write a book, you know? And I did, and 2 years later, that was my first book. My first book was called Triage. And I remember, just as an aside, the conclusion of the Writer in Residence, as they all always are amazing people, always amazing moments, the Writer in Residence at SFU. Oh, I guess I just complimented myself, I didn't mean to do that. But often there's events at the end, and I remember the event at the end of Wayde's thing where all the awesome professors and people rolled up. And I read alongside people who are lifelong friends of mine now, Ivan Drury, Mercedes Zhang, Hari Aluri. I mean, we have Ginny Desil in common, and so on. And wouldn't you know it, 10 years later when I was Writer in Residence, and I'm reviewing my bookings and looking for my appointments, and there's Wayde Compton's name. And Wayde had sent me a 10-page submission. I mean, for me to consult on his work. So, how cool is that? I mean, cool, when I think of Wayde, I think cool. There's so much more to say, but again, I'm just honored to be in proximity. I'm excited for what's ahead for you, and I thank you for all that you contribute.